Good day to you. This is A&E broadcasting to you from Chico, California. This is our fifth science series in about 18 months, about 1,000 hours, but nothing has so far been published. And this particular lecture on this second day of June in 2022 will be at least a prototype for upload to YouTube. I try to keep these videos at about 40 minutes each. That 40 minutes is fairly reasonable. A half an hour, you never seem to get quite enough in, but if it goes more than 45 minutes, people start thinking it's an hour, which is a lot. 40 minutes. And what is this? What am I doing? Without going into my whole history, I will just say that I am an amateur scientist, which is an advantage. It's a great disadvantage to be a professional scientist. And I don't mean that derogatorily. I mean they're hobbled because they're trying to make money. And whenever you're trying to make money at something, it just compromises what you're doing. People take up various arts, all kinds of things, because they like it. They find out at an early age that they enjoy music and begin to learn an instrument, perhaps become very good at it. But they pursue it because they love it. Scientists begin very often the same way. We, as humans, are attracted to scientific topics because, of course, of the beauty of the natural world. There is no higher form of art than nature. Man can do nothing to even approach the artistic beauty of the earth, and, of course, what is beyond the earth. And that is a perfect segue,
which I finally learned how to pronounce thanks to my sister,
into what we do here. We is I. It's AE, which stands for Anagalactic and Extragalactic. Anagalactic has to do with an outdated word, which I've bought at a thrift store and decided to use for myself. Anagalactic means something, which I'll share with you later. But that's A&E. It's short for ＡEIOU, AE Interactive Online University, which is also pretentious. But when you work alone, but you take yourself seriously, you try to give yourself every impetus you can. So what do we do here? We, meaning you and I. We love science. We're not professional scientists, although of course you can be both. Well, I suppose that would just be, that's an extraordinary blessing. I've heard many times in my life the adage that if you can get paid for what you love to do, well, then you're sitting pretty. Well, there's nothing better than to be in love with science and be able to get paid for it. But I feel sorry for you if you have to do that. It's not a very pleasant journey because you will be compromised. There's no way around it because you'll be thinking of money. If you have to do science to any degree in order to make money, then you simply cannot ever rise to the top. And you won't, because you cannot serve mammon. And I think you know the other word. In the Bible, it's God. Yeshua said you can't serve money. That's what mammon means. And God. Equally. You can partake of both, but you can only serve one. Now, we don't say God here, not because it's taboo. Professional scientists do not like to admit that they have any connection with the word God, because it's dangerous to their occupation to admit that, because it'll ruin their reputation with other scientists. Now, I'm not saying that's a good practice to persecute people because of their religious belief. I myself, as all men, do believe in God. Every man believes in God. You wouldn't be alive if you didn't believe in God. So this whole thing about not believing in God is simply a pretense. But it is one of the hazards of the industry that science simply will not tolerate the mention of God. And Neil deGrasse Tyson has come out quite vociferously on this, and I'd like to say a word in his defense. He is a public diplomat, practically a public servant, although he's not a servant, but this, when you guide the public in your planetarium, and of course, a lot of the people that visit are going to be American Protestants, or the biggest assholes in the world when they're religious. It's okay to be whatever you want to be. I don't judge you at all. But I do judge that type of person as they attempt to nettle a scientist, just another man, with their religious thumping. And as a young man, I hope I wasn't guilty of that, but I was on the side of the creationists and the creationist natural selectionist debates. It's always best in science to avoid conflict. There really is no necessity for it. And in true science, pure science, which would be that just stripped of all human emotion, which wouldn't be fun, there is no conflict at all. The closest thing to conflict would be a debate, purely verbal and purely mental. It doesn't go to you losing your job or losing your status or losing your paycheck, which is the situation today, as is very well known. You have to be very careful. Well, that is simply inimical to pure science. And so what we do here is we pursue amateur science. And I won't take your money. I will not accept money for what I do. So what do I have to offer that might be worth anything, monetary or otherwise? Something rather startling, and it's taboo. It's called the truth. A scientist, a rational man, will smile and understand what I'm saying, but most people get the hives when they hear that word, for very good reason, which you don't need to worry about with me, because I'm using the word truth in its truthful sense. You want truth. Whether you know it or not, you want it as much as I do. It's the same thing with people who say that they're atheists. You're not fooling God, and you're not fooling the devil, and you're not fooling anyone around you.
Unless you do, in which case it's their own stupid fault for believing you.
I don't believe you. You're not an atheist. What you might be is stupid. And science has something to say to you, which I will tell you. And whether you like it or not makes no difference. You will hear it. Not if you're just an average Joe. I don't pester people. I don't go door to door. But I will tell the truth. And that's dangerous. You actually have to be very careful when you do that. You don't want to be saying things that maybe are going to upset someone's apple cart who may have power to take vengeance on you because you stepped on their toes. People will do that. Unfair? Of course it's unfair. Unscientific? Oh, yes. But scientists do this to each other all the time. Scientists are not exempt from being human. So let me begin by saying that there are only two kinds of scientists. There are professional scientists, and if you want to respect them, and I do, because they worked very hard to attain the high level of their art, which is in some scientific field. Nobody gets medals for being a scientist. You get medals for being an application scientist. Well, that does not include the truth. You do want the truth. The truth is valuable. And just to quote one of my favorite books, the book of Proverbs, get understanding. With all you're getting, get understanding. Sell all you have, going to wisdom, which is one step beyond understanding. We'll get to that. I cover a lot of territory in presenting the truth. I'll present the truth to you about something that's not strictly speaking science, but is strictly speaking to be told the way it is and not some other way. And we'll get to the scientific method too. I've already produced 5 series of lectures on science, well over 1,200 hours. This practice, okay? Not I'm trying to get these uploaded to YouTube, and I got my first video uploaded to YouTube today. It was not on science. It was about a drunken adventure on the Nepali coast of the Big Island. Yeah, I'm from Santa Cruz. And this is for the kids. Don't worry if you're starting to drool, because you can see that this is yummy. This is very good for you. It won't hurt you. It's ground up tobacco. What you don't want to do is smoke it, because then you'll get asthma like me and have a voice that sounds like I have sandpaper in my throat. But when you're old enough, somewhere between 14 and 17, you'll be able to buy this. It's exorbitantly expensive, so you may want to just raid your mommy's purse, just get a couple of $10 bills, get a couple of cans of this, and the first time you do it, you'll throw up. And then you become a man. This isn't for girls. Um, I was a religious man, and I smoked, even though I was a Seventh-day Adventist. I smoked the whole time I was a Seventh-day Adventist, even when I was a missionary. If they catch you, it's actually serious, but I was in Kiev at the only time that I would have been caught since I didn't really smoke in church. But when I was a missionary, officially, for 7 months in Kiev, I would get up in the morning, and my roommate had insomnia, so he was just always there somewhere. And I would walk out into the snow, since I arrived in January, and smoke a Sherman cigarette. I had like a half a carton of them.
Well, let's face it, I brought a whole carton of Shermans with me.
And then they ran out. And I was quite sad because I very much enjoy my Sherman cigarette in the morning, and maybe another one in the evening. Then I ran out. And then I found out about Prima. I bought Ukrainian cigarettes, the ones that very few people bought. The babushki, basically little old ladies, selling cigarettes, would have some Primas that, like, one for every 5 of the ones that people bought. I tried some of the cheap ones. They're not bad, but they're a little raspier. Not much. They taste like tobacco. There's not much difference between tobacco. Some people say, oh, you don't know anything like the James Bond. Well, good for you. But I did notice I very much like Prima cigarettes. I was a Bible scholar for 30 years, and I have been exclusively devoted to science for the past, I'll just say, a dozen years. It's actually been 13 years now. When I took up science when my wife died, she was 28 years old and 25 years younger than I, and yes, I met her in Ukraine. And we were very happy together, had been for, well, ever since we had met. But she got cancer, an incurable form, and she died. And then I basically had a mental breakdown. I could feel it coming, and I knew that it would be a matter of time. And I won't tell you the whole story. It's actually quite beautiful, but she died in peace and quite happy. I was with her at the last minute of her life, and she kissed me goodnight and even waved to me with her paralyzed arm. And then she closed her eyes and fell asleep and slept for 32 hours and did not wake up. And then I lost my mind. Not immediately, but I worked another 8 months because she made me promise I would continue working because she knew that I would go bananas after she was dead. I worked another 8 months and then flew to Kiev to see her grave. And when I came back, I knew I didn't have a job. They could not give me another leave, and so I quit. And I haven't worked since. I haven't worked in 13 years. You might ask, where have I gotten my money from? I'll tell you this, not from science. Although I did make my living as a database programmer. That was in a previous lifetime. You only live twice. But I haven't worked a lick since she died, and I let my money run out. I became homeless and ended up in, well, paradise for the fire that destroyed my life's work and all my belongings. And that was just 3.5 years ago, and now I'm in Chico, California, which I insist on pronouncing, and I believe it's the Portuguese fashion. I know it is Portuguese, but I'm not certain if I'm pronouncing it in the Portuguese fashion. I think I am, but it's Chico, California, which I like. It's an oasis in the northern Sonoran Desert. It's a very fertile region, has a lot of almond trees. It's the Sacramento Valley, which is the northern arm of the San Joaquin-Sacramento Central Valley River system. The nearest mountain of any merit is Shasta, which is among the top 3 or 4 peaks in California. It only misses Mount Whitney by a couple of 100 feet. But Shasta is unique. It's not part of a range of mountains like the Sierra Nevada where Whitney is. It's by itself. And it's a stratovolcano, so it's quite magnificent. I'm actually a shore person. I've lived in Santa Cruz for well over 14 years, but 14 years at a stretch. And I haven't been outside the country. I'm not a world traveler, except I did go to Ukraine to live. And I went to Ukraine 5 times. Technically, I went to Turkey. That was for a week's vacation after my wife died. And then I came back here, ran out of money, and now I'm in Chico, having studied science for 13 years. I took up science in order to not go insane. And I didn't go insane, but I did have a mental breakdown because if you just let your money run out in 3 years, you're not thinking very clearly. And I wasn't, and I knew it, but I didn't care because I did not want to live anymore. I wasn't suicidal. But if you're suicidal, I mean, you have to get help because unless you're in pain. Well, there's different kinds of pain. I didn't feel any pain. I'm certainly not feeling any now, but I did want to let the sand of my life run out. And that's unnatural. What really cured me, I marked this as the turning point, is I went to see a therapist. It was on the government's bill. I'm a veteran, and so I got some assistance, which is why I'm not homeless, to be perfectly honest. By the way, now I'm collecting Social Security. It's not much, but it's enough. And after the fire, I got some help from FEMA. But I'm not what you would call rich, but I have no intention of ever working again. What I'd like to say is that for the past 12 years, I have worked harder every day learning science than I ever worked at a paying job because I love it. And I have an aptitude for it. It's an extraordinary aptitude. It's rare. And so let's begin there with what science is. I bill myself as an amateur scientist who is seeking the truth that science has discovered. That is what science does. It seeks the truth that can be communicated. Science is an art of communication, but it's a unique art of communication. It uses what's called rational logic. And rational logic, in combination with numeric measurements, there is something called structure, which is geometry, and discoveries have been made without appealing to numbers. But one thing you do have to do is ensure through logic that what you're saying is not your opinion at all and has nothing to do really with you except that you're saying it. Instead of getting what we call, I won't say truth, but information, just stuff to help us make decisions, of course we consult with people. It's real. You certainly start out by doing that since you can't even talk. All you can do is listen. Well, we never shake that off. We're meant to be together and we are meant to communicate. We don't have to communicate in numbers and science all the time. Well, of course not. We want to tell stories and have fun. That's what I do. That's how I picture eternity, is telling stories, having fun, and doing science. So I am a real scientist. And there's only two kinds. There's a real scientist. Science is huge, and there's room for everybody. And people who make their living at science, that doesn't mean that they're lesser. Just because they spent most of their life trying to get ahead, to get a degree, to get through a good school, to get good training, good credentials, they worked hard. But that's not science. That's not science at all. That's industry. They are pursuing a scientific course of action. They're serving science. They are scientists. I include everybody in this. Nobody's a lesser scientist except by compromise. We all mean well and we should judge each other, and I don't judge other humans, but I do judge statistical groups. So if the shoe fits, as my mother would say, wear it. Or as a good Irish friend of mine from youth said, if the foo shits, wear it. I laughed, but I was young. No, there's only one real scientist, and that's an amateur scientist. But you can be both. It's rare, though. If you're a professional scientist, I'm afraid that you just are going to need to rethink your life. But no, you don't need to hear that from me. You've already rethought your life. You're doing fine. But I always assume that if someone is doing science, that they're trying to do it the way I am, which is to get the truth. But that's not true of professional scientists. They are no longer trying to get truth above all. What they're trying to do above all is get another paycheck. And you can say, you could argue with me. We'll get some beer and we'll argue about it, okay? Not right now. I know you can be both, and everyone either hopes or assumes that they are both. I'm telling you, a fact of life. If you have to make your living at science, then you are compromised. And you need to be cautious because you will be tempted, as statistically has been shown you will be tempted to lie. You will be tempted to defame the good name of science. And this is the rule now because of the rise of one kind of science. It's industrial science. And it uses a special branch of real science called analytical science. This is science that uses exclusively numbers, only numbers. Geometry has to be brought in, but they don't like it. They want the numbers because numbers is ka-ching, and it's more than that. It's miraculous what we get from numbers. In the most recent video series, I had turned my attention to the number system, which was not my goal. My goal was extragalactic astronomy, to teach you about the universe, and specifically the secrets of the universe which have been discovered, which have been drowned out by the analytical side. It's unbelievable. Part of my duty is to expose you to the truth. As pompous, pretentious, and precocious as that may sound, you're just not getting it. But it is there. The best way I can say it is a bit emotional. You're not allowed to know it. That's due to a pressure. It's a group mind pressure that evolves. And it's the only form of evolution there is human evolution. It's not biological. There's no such thing as genetic evolution. And that's one of the things that I've been wanting to expose more people to. Natural selection has been disproved. But we're going to get into that a little bit. And I'm also going to tell you about something else that has been discovered in my lifetime, which was how the dinosaurs were buried. Now, both of those things that I just mentioned bring in topics from Genesis. One is the creation, and one is the flood. So you might think that I'm a Christian. I am a Christian by faith, but that has nothing to do with science, and the Bible has nothing to do with science. Almost nothing. And no one knows that better than I, one of the foremost Bible scholars probably of all time, especially for my groundbreaking work in the commandments, particularly the third and the fourth, where I had hoped to make two discoveries, and I made one, the greatest religious discovery in the history of the Bible. And the other one, having to do with the Sabbath, I almost got right. And then someone, a very rare person, had to correct me, and he was an astronomer. Astronomers tend to know things that other people just don't know, and this guy just happened to know what is the real Sabbath. And so I do know that, and I also know the meaning of the Tetragrammaton, and nobody else does, except for now it's down to 5 people. So that's who I am in a nutshell. I turned to science in order to get into galactic astronomy in order to preserve my mental health for as long as it took me to go through a nervous breakdown and still survive. And that is what happened. And now I'm reasonably well off and quite well balanced, largely due to the medicinal effects of beer and marijuana and tobacco. The only 3 drugs I use, unless you include the one for asthma. I used to take one for diabetes, but that's been cured after the fire by bicycling every day, all day, through 100-degree weather, every day, all summer, bicycling. Partly so I wouldn't go into some kind of tailspin from having lost my life's work. I wrote 6 books, 4 of them on the Bible and 2 of them on astrophysics, galactic phenomena, on which I am something of an amateur expert. Let's return to this amateur business. I do take a hard line. The science is not about being wishy-washy. We're not really interested in opinion gathering, and theories are kind of an annoyance. What we want is proof, because we want the truth. In professional science, that is not the case. It can be the case for individuals, but professional science has no interest in the truth, because the true meaning of science is for getting the truth that can be communicated. Religion cannot do that. Religion can only communicate another kind of truth. And as I have been very careful to prove, there are exactly 2 kinds of truth. And one of them is just whatever is not based on the scientific method is the other kind of truth. All religion is that kind of truth. All philosophy, all the petty woes of humans having to do with death and injustice and agony, those have nothing to do with science. Science is only concerned with one thing: the truth that can be proved by interrogating the universe. And this would be the universe in the broadest and most encompassing sense. You don't want to get truth from humans. But we communicate with each other, and so we do need a language for communicating the truth of the universe. And that is the language of science. It is called, informally, rational logic. And it's one language. Humans have 10,000 languages. Today, I'm not sure there's 10,000 left, but there are thousands of languages. In every language spoken by men, it is possible to communicate truth using this language, and only using this language. But that doesn't mean you have to be a mathematician. Most of us aren't, unless they're pure geometers, but you won't get far without using both, because numbers and geometric objects have been proved to be the same. And that's another discovery which it's very unlikely you've ever heard of, the greatest breakthrough in the history of the language of science, and that's called geometric algebra, which establishes that algebra and geometry are the same thing. And one language describes them both in the most amazingly simple fashion. So we have the disproving of natural selection, the burial of the dinosaurs, and the worldwide flood. Scandalously suppressed information, such as the fact that natural selection has been disproved. You won't hear any professional scientist ever say that. It's from the pressure of the group mind, which is another thing that's not talked about very much, but it does explain evil very well. It explains why your governments can never fix anything and why the world can't fix itself. It's because of something called a group mind. I spent a long time studying the nature of Satan, which I don't recommend to people. I actually got worried about studying Satan so much. Is this really healthy? But I was trying to find out just exactly what this thing was. Well, I have a pretty good scientific definition of what Satan is, which may or may not have any effect on your or my opinion of an angelic being, which is in the Bible. Particularly in the book of Job, which is a book that you never hear read in churches, another secret of the universe. But Satan is the group mind of men. It's human males. When they work together, form a group mind. Now this can work out well, and everything good that we see in terms of technology is the result of that. But remember, there's also a meat grinder. There's an industrial aspect. There's funding. There's business. You have to build things, which means you're going to need the government, which means you're going to be compromised. It's not going to be science in terms of seeking truth. Now, that has been poo-pooed. Like, if you're seeking truth, then you can't be a scientist. You're a philosopher or with some religion. Or you're just a kook, a nut, an annoyance. Which is why Neil deGrasse Tyson does not like God. It's not because he doesn't believe in God or he doesn't love God. It's because he hates Christians, which he should. They're assholes. Nothing against Christ, only against his followers. And I am one, so I might have to include myself. Nope. I'm one of the good guys, and there's not that many of us. It's not to say that everyone else is bad. None of this is personal. It's simply to give a definition of what science is, the pursuit of truth that can be communicated. That alone is science. Technology is a spin-off, very important one, because we get a pat on the head from the universe from that. That is nothing to put down, and I don't. It's only the group mind that goes along with it. Well, you know that the group mind, if it gets hold of the truth, will turn it into something ugly. That doesn't mean you and I are going to form a group mind. We won't, with me in it, because I work alone.
I haven't touched a woman in 14 years. And I sure would like to, but not as much as I want the truth.
But you know, there are certain kinds of truth. It's on a hierarchy. Wouldn't it be better to know your origins, like where you're from, so you can orient and then get your life under control so you can die in peace and know where you're going? That's what science is for. But science is extremely limited in its ability to address questions of a certain form. And I've identified, as a rational logician, 3 kinds of questions. 3 of them are unary. That is, you can ask when, where, or what. But then you have how, which is a second order question, because it goes to process. And then there is the why question, which solicits purpose. There is, in the pursuit of the meaning of life, all third order questions are of the same kind in that they solicit purpose, which we can't really predict as scientists in terms of will or choice of good or bad. It's probabilistic, and sorry, we don't do that. Although in quantum mechanics we're kind of forced to. We'll get to that too. But in order to get at purpose, you really need to go back to the origins and see where the thing arose, where the how did we get here? How did you get here? And then you run into a roadblock from the natural selectionists because they tell you you're from monkeys, and that's a lie. It is a lie. It has nothing to do with religion. Well, I mean, you could say that if you're into religion, it does. But in science, we don't care about religion. We only care about the truth. And by the way, if any truth contradicts the Bible, then the Bible has been contradicted. I have not yet found that, although several men with whom I've talked with over the years, as a Bible scholar, I hung out with other Bible scholars, of course, sometimes. And we did talk about these things, and it even was suggested to me by other men who studied the Bible with a goodwill to get some truth from the Bible to help myself and others. And it was brought up to me that there are certain things in the Bible that do contradict physics, such as the sun standing still, and this whole thing about the firmament in heaven, and a couple of other things. But you have to understand something about the Bible. It does not necessarily lie. Some people could point at it and say that's a lie, and they're entitled to their opinion, because that's what the book solicits, is your opinion. It's not scientific truth. It's not presented as such. There's no science in the Bible that I was able to find, unless you count in the wisdom books where it's a different kind of science. And we'll get to that. In the creation story, is not attempting to give you something that you can check with a scientific method. It's simply stating origins from a certain point of view that you might just want to know it's like this. It is accurate. Science has never found a flaw with the Genesis sequence. There are arguments over words, and I became a scholar in Greek, which is not what the Old Testament is written in, but also Hebrew. I learned Hebrew in order to use Strong's Concordance and everything else to find out what these words mean. Like, for instance, the stars were made on the 4th day. Well, I have heard some harebrained stuff, both inside and outside the church, that talks about the stars all being made on one day. That is not what it says. That word stars is planets. And those could have been engineered in one day, not created, formed. Be that as it may, you do need to get back to your origins if you're attempting to answer the most important question that human beings have. And there's 1,000 different forms of this question, and you yourself have at least one specific form of that question that's only for you and only you can answer. That's the one you want to answer. It could be, what is the meaning of life? It could be like, where am I from? But these are third order questions. You're really asking, why am I here? Or why is this here? Or why something? Well, why is a third order question. And science cannot deal directly with those. What it can do is reduce your why question to a how question, because we can get it processed. And that becomes extremely important when you get into cosmology, which we will get into again. I do science, and I work harder at it than I ever worked at a paying job every single day, because I can't get enough of it. I love it. I love knowing the truth. It's very much helped me. I think you can tell. And that's what I'd like to close with, this word of advice to you, which I've already given to myself to my great benefit. An amateur scientist is one who might be, as well as a tinker or someone who just takes things apart and puts them back together again, which is how we all start as scientists. One way or another, we're doing analysis and synthesis, because we learn something from it. It makes us happy. The kind of scientist that we all aspire to, or if we're not aspiring to that, something's wrong with us, you want to be a seeker after the truth. And that does cross the religious boundary. If you're a seeker after the truth, that is actually understood by the universe. You will be singled out for special attention if you do that. It doesn't look like sinners are singled out for any special attention at all. They're not stopped. Makes us all unhappy that they're not stopped. Don't worry about it. They'll get theirs. What we need to worry about is rational men. You're trying to become a real man. This is actually bar mitzvah. Has nothing to do with being the age of 13 and having a squirt. That's biological. You can't help that. To become a man is to realize that you have a mind, that you should be using it, and that it will bring you truth. That is recognized on the other side. I don't want to sound like a Native American at this point, like, I'm getting all spooky on you. But when you devote yourself to the truth, that is known in the spirit world. I'll just put it that way. If you're not, then you face the judgment, and we all will do that. You will live after death, or nothing makes sense. So you can start thinking that way if you've never thought that way before. Yeah, you're going to wake up on the other side, and it'll just be just like it is now, only different. You will be you, and you will pay for whatever you did. And there's no way out of that. Except with leniency. That can be had. Stay with us. We're seekers after the truth. I'm a man who is on the way. And I'm not going to be here much longer. I don't ask for money, but I do expect you to pay attention, because I'm not going to lie to you. I am going to give you the gold. More gold than you thought existed. We'll be right back.